Hello, welcome to another edition of the Geeks Group podcast. With us today is, as usual, Josie. Hi, Josie.
Hello, everyone.
And today's topic is going to be about technology within government. Very interesting topic. Government traditionally have had the stigma of being slow moving behemoth, and always been synonymous to paperwork and forms and mailing things in. So recently, last week in particular, we attended the Digital Government Summit here in LA. And Josie, why don't you give us a little idea of what your thoughts about that event and what we learned about government and technology in general?
So, not to hype up LA, but I think LA is one of the highest populated counties in the U.S. So naturally, we have a lot of constituents that need a lot of services, right? That need to apply for these services and need these services readily available. So the summit was extremely insightful on kind of hearing what it is that they're doing in the different agencies within Los Angeles to revolutionize from within, right? So it was nice to kind of hear that perspective and kind of really be excited around all of the digital transformations that are happening within these respective agencies. We do have two monumental events happening in the next 10 years here in LA. So we've got the Olympics coming and we've also got the World Cup coming, right? So you've got a city that's already, limited with all these constraints of volume, right? These large numbers of constituents. And then you add on top of it tourists that are going to be coming in at an international level. And I think the government, at least in the county and just in LA, are very cognizant of the increased need for those services so it was just interesting. It was interesting to see everybody's perspective, but most importantly, to hear what they're doing to transform digitally what they're doing.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is that when you have a city or a county the size of Los Angeles or the metro with Orange County, it takes a lot of resources to run that city. The city doesn't clean itself, it doesn't run itself, the lights don't turn on and on by themselves, but like there's somebody guiding all that, right? And then we tend to ignore the sanitation, the power, the water. There's a lot of moving parts that make us live the way we do, and we go about our business enjoying our streets and our amenities without realizing the amount of people that are behind making sure all that keeps on running smoothly. I think the LA County has something like 110,000 employees. That's a very large organization that, with going back to the stigma of technology, thinking that we can run an organization of 110,000 employees with pen and paper is unrealistic. So obviously, everybody knows that they must have some kind of systems. I think one thing that I realized last week from that event was it goes beyond just the basics of running the 110 people. I was very pleasantly surprised to see that within all the divisions of a large organization, government organization like the LA County, the county itself has its own CIO, and then each division also has its own CIO, which means they're really betting on technology to kind of be able to provide that excellent service to the constituents and to keep the department running smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, when you're dealing with such a large county, right, you've got the constituents, you've got the employees that are delivering the services, and everything seems to run well, and you're not really understanding all the orchestration happening at the same time. And then you add another level of complexity with an emergency, like, for example, what Hawaii experienced last week, the deadliest fire. Like, how do you collaborate and communicate effectively regularly, and then how do you do it during crisis time, right? So what I'm saying is, hats off to what they're doing. It's extremely difficult, and but I think that they understand that technology is a tool for them to make things more effective.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, our thoughts and prayers go to our people in Hawaii, and our hearts are with them. And yes, besides the fact that there were some system failures as far as the warning system didn't go off or the sirens didn't go off that could have saved lives, it just tells you how important it is to have everything working all the time. And it's not only about putting systems in place, but also making sure they're redundant, making sure they're tested, making sure they're put through at least some kind of a disaster simulation program to make sure they're working. On the bright side, though, I think the response team has been doing a great job trying to get everything together, and of course, technology is at the heart of it. All these people that are on the street, all these people that are lost, all these people that are need resources. I mean, we're talking about tens and tens of thousands of people that need to be triaged and catered to, and without a system to be able to do that, a system that probably didn't exist prior to the fires. Maybe like there's going to be a lot of scrambling to get a system up running to keep track of all that, and yeah, that's where having a IT infrastructure in place already. I'm sure the state of Hawaii or CIO is already not sleeping trying to get that system up running, if not in production already. That's what having the infrastructure, the technical infrastructure, the resources, the technical resources, infrastructure in place allows you to do, is basically be able to step in and respond fast when disasters happen.
Yeah, so again, the amount of coordination that's required, I think, is magical in itself. So, for example, when you have a disaster, right, you have the before, the during, and the after, right? So the before, not only do you have to keep the day-to-day going, so delivering services if people need those services, but then in addition to that, you need to start planning in case there's an emergency. So making sure that LAPD and fire and medical, they're all simultaneously coordinating and communicating effectively during crisis time. And in order for that to happen, they need to pre-train. They need to do some drills. They need to make sure that the systems are talking to each other, for example. So we are techies. So when I'm thinking of all this, I'm saying, well, how are the systems communicating with each other? Because you have probably LAPD that uses one system, right? And you have maybe the fire department that uses a separate system, right? How do these systems integrate within each other? What type of alert systems are created? What type of APIs need to be created? Is there a centralization of information? So is there a data warehouse? Like I'm just thinking as a techie, all the different things that need to be orchestrated, the technical limitations that need to happen before. So orchestrating the training, during the event, and then past the event. How do you, so Department of Public Social Services would probably come in after the event, probably to deliver services to the people that need them, right? So when do you know to bring in the different agencies, and how do these systems talk to each other? And how do you house all of the information and make decisions? So, for example, if I know that I have, I don't know, let's just say a number, 1,000 constituents in maybe a zone with a lot of apartments, right? And I know that maybe a couple blocks down the street you have residents that live in single-family homes. So there's a higher concentration of people in Zone B versus Zone A. And how do I deploy maybe 20 ambulances here versus 5 ambulances here, because the volume is going to be much higher here? And how do I make those decisions? How do I do that pre-planning prior to, so that when I know, oh, this is Zone B, it belongs to this person. So how is data helping them pre-plan, execute, and then deliver services after that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think depends on the system that they're using, and yes, there's definitely different systems used in each department, including the reporting side. Even the reporting side is still limited to the department. Now there's some kind of a reporting function. I'm pretty sure that they can request data from within each other, But that becomes difficult when you're a large organization. You have a lot of subdivisions, each responsible for its dataverse. So yes, the government really has to work on that and make sure that the data is facilitated across all units so that they can collaborate better. And the other issue is when you have so much data with we when you have so much data of constituent, right? Then the question of privacy and security comes into place. Now, how much of that data do you share anonymized? How much do you share as is, right? So, yeah, that's a major concern for all the CISOs within the government, because they have probably more private information than any other organization out there, and all it takes is one bad actor to kind of ruin the whole party. So I believe that there are it's not just a technical challenge. There's also some security challenges and some ethical challenges in place too before they can fully collaborate.
Yeah, as a tech company and operating in the private sector, it's easiest for us to say, oh, fail quickly. Speed of iteration beats quality of iteration. And you want elements of that in the public sector, but you really hold them to a higher standards because the level of responsibility towards kind of keeping the constituents' information safe is to another level. So hats off to the teams that are doing this every day. It's not easy, and it really respect.
Yeah.
How and as I was thinking about data security, I was thinking, okay, how can we utilize some of the new technology that's coming out, and how do we manage the change management to make sure that the constituents, because at the end of the day they have to.
Well, one thing that we see more and more is government agencies going on cloud, whether it's Google or Amazon or Salesforce or Azure. They're very open now to being on the cloud, and all these cloud providers, the cloud gov, they have their own government, like government clouds, government servers that are they're have more strict security measures. So from that aspect, you can tell that outsourcing, at least from the infrastructure perspective, outsourcing the security of the hardware and the infrastructure to a third party, that actually at least takes away the burden of having to find, train, and maintain the talent and resources to be able to do that. I think that's one good step that a lot of government agencies have been doing. In that aspect and that point, what they really have to focus on is access security. And that goes a long way as to design architecture, system architecture. So a lot of things go into play when you're developing systems in general. That with the government, you have to be a little bit more careful about breaches than you would with like you said, with the private sector.
What about utilizing some of these emerging technologies that, like blockchain, to kind of protect the data? Decentralizing it. Now make it accessible in one single place and have it tokenized and kind of.
Yeah. I think there's certainly some aspect of the government that could take advantage of technology like blockchain. Probably things where you have to track where things came from, or you have to, usually when it has to do with tracking, and you want the data to be, you want to ensure the validity of the data and that nobody has messed with it. So that's a very good use case. What I do see, the new tech that I do see could bring a lot of value to the government is AI. I think a lot of, just take a simple digital assistant can help a lot with a lot of inquiries that constituents have to their local government, from finding the nearest dump site for batteries to picking up compost to like, there's a lot of different questions that you could ask a county, for example, that today you have to know what department to address in order to get the answer. So I know there's an initiatives in the county of LA where they're releasing a new 311, and it should encompass all the services of the city. But I think in general, having most of us as constituents, we do not deal with the government except for paying our taxes or paying our bills if it's a government-run service.
Well, the saddest part is that the people that need the services the most, so like maybe underserved areas or lower poverty areas, they need access to those services fast, right?
And that's where AI could come in, I believe. AI could come into triaging and basically having a one entry point for all the services and having the system smart enough to know where to send the request. That's where I can see things like machine learning take a big role in prediction and predictive analytics in general, like analyzing trends, allocating resources to the areas that are more likely to need that particular resource within the next month, within the next 6 months, within the next year, pre-planning. I think there's a big, because the government sits on a lot of data. They have a lot of data. Now, is it all in a format that it can be easily analyzed? Probably not. But I think with the right initiative, I think the government could take advantage of that, of AI in general, and we could see a lot of AI powered services to the public in the future.
So let me test you on that, since he is a super geek and I like to tinker with your brain. In the situation like what just happened in Hawaii, right now I'm assuming there's a lot of friends and families waiting to get recovery confirmation or waiting to get information about their loved ones, right? I mean, it's a horrible position to be in, and my heart goes out to them. But how can AI and machine learning help notify, maybe track and notify the, like, is there something that maybe we could tap into on the cell phones of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, beyond the basics, basically, going back to the basics, I think what they really need is a good tracking system. It's really a way to keep track of who's found and who's lost, where they were found, where they were last seen, basic information. So you really need a solid, you need to be able to spin up a system, and I don't know if the state has it, but like tech companies like ours can set up a system like that really, really fast, right? And get it in production. Then you take that data, and now you need to be able to facilitate access to it. And that's where AI can come in. You can build a digital assistant that you can either you can text with, or you can speak with, or you can chat with, or you can address through a website. That digital assistant could actually tell you information about the people that you're looking for or the resources you're looking for. So I think that's the quickest way you could implement AI in this scenario, within the reasonable timeline to be able to be effective and make sense, right? Unfortunately, in times like this, it's speed of iteration really does beat the 100% quality of iteration. I mean, if you find 80 people out of 100, it's better than not finding anybody.
Yeah. I'm thinking, like, is it technically possible to do something like, for my fellow Apple users, we have a Find My, right? And you're able to add different devices onto that are from your family, and you're able to track them and see what the last location was, GPS location of that device. Is there any way to kind of build something that can feed off of that iCloud?
Yeah, I mean, that will require the contribution of Apple, obviously, because they have all that data. So maybe the government can actually work with Apple to try to facilitate that and probably build a location map based on where people were the moment of. Yeah, that's definitely can be done. Another thing that could be done is that drones can be used to kind of, with some AI vision, to try to detect um, anomalies or pockets where people could have been or might have been, surveying the the remains of the burned structures to see where potentially the traffic might have flown when they were trying to escape, or towards the fire or away from the fire. So there's things like that that could be done. I mean, it's work, it's a lot of modeling, it takes some time. But again, when you only have a short period of time to be able to find or rescue, or even, we're not even talking about rescue people right now at this point, we're just saying about finding remains, to kind of give family members closure, and people can start grieving. You don't have the time to do all that modeling and all these large scale initiatives. You have to stick to, the quick return technology investments that will help you get some closure.
Yeah. Well, interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting subject for sure.
Well, let's not forget that one of the other thing about AI in general is how we'll be able to make the life, well, not AI, but technology in general, how can we make the life of the disadvantaged better, the disabled, how it could provide better accessibility to services that people don't have today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are all things that, you can have AI now that reads sign language. So if you have somebody who can't really understand sign language, you can have a translator. It can translate to you. So there's a lot of things that the technology can help with in regular times, let alone tough times, and that the government should be able to implement pretty easily. The good news about all this is, which the best thing I took from that digital government summit, is that the government is not, the stigma that the government doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to technology and nobody wants to work for the government tech agency. I don't think that's valid anymore. I think they're very aware of the innovation. They want innovation. They have some. I met some very, very sharp mind, a lot of bright people last week that we had intriguing technical conversation with. I do think that people should know that adoption of such technology at the government level comes with a lot of risk. That their job is not only to provide the service to us, but to make sure to eliminate the risk of service disruption. And that's where, where private organizations, we have that leeway to kind of take risk and gamble on certain technologies. The government does. But today I really want to give a shout out to all those CTOs and CIOs I met last week. Tell them, what a great job they're doing, and it's a tough road, but they're gonna
keep
get
up
there.
the good fight. Like, I think that what my takeaway was, Rome wasn't built in a day. The world wasn't built in a day. It's going to take time, and maybe it'll take hybrid strategic initiatives where, hey, we can't do the entire thing, and we can't go from one day to another to blockchain, but how do we set the seeds down? And maybe it's going to be a hybrid solution, and then we're going to move towards that change, right? And it's not like all or nothing. It's a well thought out plan that will be executed in due time, where they're going to manage risk, but it will eventually happen. So,
yeah, and one other thing that's very interesting is the government, local government in general, is not the same. Like, you have these large local governments like LA and New York and Chicago that are huge, right? And they have all the budget in the world, but they don't. But they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of people. And then you have these smaller governments that that actually they look at all this technology happening and they might not have the budget to go there. And so it was very interesting to see the contrast between the city of LA and the city of Glendale or Long Beach. And for, I mean, for tech purposes, I don't think these smaller cities should be discouraged from adopting and innovating. I do think that it's probably easier to get together in some kind of a consortium or some kind of an R&D group where they can actually pitch in all together to kind of try to come up with a unified system to kind of they can all use. But they should not be discouraged from R&D within the latest tech, because although it requires budget and resources, it doesn't take that much to do a proof of concept and know if something's working or not. That will give you a great ROI down the line. And we've seen cities adopting technology. Like a lot of the CTOs, the city of Long Beach, for example, they are having some great initiatives right now going through digital transformation. That's a great example of taking it forward, taking the bull by the horn. We're gonna make a difference and provide a good service to our constituent.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like maybe the element of coordination or collaboration will create a 1 + 1 = 5 effect, where if they just share kind of some of the stuff that they're doing on one side, that'll maybe spur something else. I did kind of hear quite a bit of coordination happening unofficially. So I think that they do understand that there's a need for that, and organically they're moving towards that. Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot to do. Obviously, they're fighting the good fight and they're delivering services, very much needed services, and it's not as easy as it sounds, just because of that added level of responsibility for security. And, sometimes speed of iteration is not what's mandated. Maybe what we need is a hybrid approach and a well thought out plan of execution.
Yeah, well, at the end of this podcast, I want to give a shout out to all our public servants. Really have a great respect for everything that they do day in and day out to allow us to live and go about our business the way we do. So thank you all for everything you do. All right, well, that was the end of today's episode of the Geeks Group podcast. Josie, thank you. And we'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.